What's good, y'all? It's Brian back with Blurting While Dad. Um, I was out last night. My son's birthday, and he had a music program, and so I did the dad thing last night. And so, unfortunately, I wasn't able to stream, and I'm trying to get past the ADHD thing of over explaining myself to people that I don't really need to explain myself to, and so that's why I didn't put any kind of preemption or anything on the show. I was just out, dad, out doing dad things. So that's kind of what it was. So that's why we're doing this tonight. So, um, my name is Brian. I am Black nerd, business owner, comic book nerd, any kind of nerd that you can imagine. That's kind of where I'm at. And I've changed some of my ADHD meds, so my brain is a little bit different tonight. So anyway, um, but tonight we're going to talk about a couple of different issues. I want to recap something that happened last week and kind of go over that. I do have one impromptu thing that I want to discuss regarding Invincible, the TV show. I think I'm going to pick it back up. I kind of dropped it for a little bit just because I don't know. I needed a break, to be honest with you. Like, I needed kind of a break from a lot of the violence. I do want to talk about the community I built um, for black nerds of a certain age. It's called the League of Extraordinary Unks and Aunties. It's a paid community, has a bullshit filter to keep people from coming in and disrupting the vibe. And so, if you're interested in having higher level conversations as black nerds, as blurs coming together without all the red pill BS and all the other stuff that seeps into groups into larger black nerd groups, come check your boy out. Um, I wanted to do a watch along for WrestleMania, but I just had too much stuff going on. And so um, I plan on doing watch alongs as shows come out, things along those lines within the community, where we have a pretty dope place to hang out and discuss it. And I even got a little bit of it on Twitter this week where I realized that there's no real space for black nerds to congregate and talk amongst ourselves, interact with amongst ourselves, um, without some little wannabe troll doing his best impersonation of a clan member. And you even see it online. So that's what I got. All right. I do need to touch on this. Since Invincible is kind of in the news cycle. And I've seen a couple of different posts about this on TikTok. I need to hip y'all to something, and I don't want to spoil anything. If y'all ain't read the comic books, I try not to spoil shit for you, okay? And I know that Kirkman mentioned that Invincible is kind of how he tightens up aspects of the comic books that wasn't a fan of, and he kind of rewrites things. But I need to put this in. I need to put this bug in your ear. Been hearing it on social media. Everybody was mad that initially Thrag wasn't living up to their expectations of what Thrag was, and then Thrag showed out. He showed up and showed out the way I knew my boy, my G could. I knew OG could just show out on everybody. I need to put this in y'all ear. Thrag ain't beating Superman, y'all. I'm sorry. I'm not even a Superman fan like that, y'all. I'm not. I truly am not. But Thrag is not beating Superman, and there's one specific feat that is like baseline for Superman that Thrag would not be able to survive, and the comic books bear it out. Okay, and so I'm just laying it on the table. Thrag's durability is not matching Superman's for a very specific reason. I need you to, if you need to Google it, Google Google what happened to Thrag in the comic book version. It may not spoil the show because I imagine that they're probably going to change some elements of the show and alter it just because so many people are aware of how he met his end in the comic book. But understand, just understand that Thrag's durability is not touching Superman. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And Thrag's my boy. That sequence where he punched Omni-Man was one of the coldest things I've ever seen in my life. It's one of the best depictions of power scaling that I've seen in animation or any kind of live action thing where Thrag shows that there's levels to this thing. But he's not beating Superman. I'm sorry. There's one specific feat of durability, and I cannot lay it out on the table. I can't say what it is without spoiling either the comic book or the show, but there's a specific reason why Superman, in terms of durability, is above Thrag. Um, and if you read the comic book all the way to the end, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So Google it. I'm not going to spoil it for you. As we get closer to the end, as we get closer to the finale, when the series does finally end, then we can chop it up. But I'm just telling you, if you ever bring up the Superman versus Thrag debate in any stream or thread that I'm in, I'm going to lay it on the table, give you all the specific reasons why Thrag is not more durable than Superman. There's a specific reason, and it is not even tied to the show. It's a comic book thing for right now. I'll see if they bring it over into the television show, but there's a specific thing that Thrag cannot survive that Superman can't. Just throwing that out. I went out and did that thing. We did birthday and everything. So I had to not beat myself up for doing the stream, because this is a commitment I made to myself. Regardless how many people I got watching or whatnot, this is a commitment that this is kind of my outlet or whatnot. And it's going to build something bigger. I do have my brick and mortar storefront that I'm going to be turning into, because I did a stream about there's not really any third places for nerds, and so I'm actually building one. It's gonna have a video studio in it because that's my day job, but I'm also gonna have a place for nerds to hang out and congregate and stuff. And so I'm building that out. And so when I say I'm building the community, I'm building the community online and offline. And so as I get closer to that destination, you're going to see what it is. But this is something that I have a commitment that I made to myself. Okay. So last week on the stream, I had somebody kind of try to elbow their way onto the stream, and I don't mind. I love talking with y'all in the comments and responding to what you say and everything. But bro had a chip on his shoulder about some errant comment I made about the current administration, and he is feeling some kind of way about it. And he did the thing that a lot of debate me bros do, which is debate me. If I offend you or you don't like something I said, you're instantly demanding my time and attention for a debate. And he wanted to voice chat with me so he could debate with me on my own show. I don't do that. I'm not going to sit here and go back and forth with you on my show. I'm not Dean Withers or any one of those other, whatever that little dude is who has the call-in show where people that have poor social skills call in and argue with him about politics that they don't really understand. I'm not that guy. I don't want to endure it. I don't think that the debate me thing is particularly useful in terms of educating or informing anybody. And there's some specific reasons why. So that's going to be kind of our first segment, is how fucked are we? More or less, we're going to talk about why the debate me bro culture is kind of a corrosive element in our discourse about things. Okay. So last week, somebody tried to kind of brute force their way into my stream so we could have a political debate. They were demanding that we do a voice chat. And when I said I'm not going to do that, then they're like, well, ban me from your stream. I'm like, I'm not going to do that either. I'm not going to give you anything you want. You don't dictate the rules on my thing. And it kind of struck a chord with me because instead of just accepting the fact that I have a different political opinion than they do, I don't know if it's he or she, but typically debate me bro are bros. Instead of accepting I had a differing opinion regarding a political issue, this person wanted to use my platform to argue with me about it. And one thing is, with social media, for a long time, there was a time where you didn't have a direct line. If you had a different political opinion, you ended up either somebody had to express it and you countered it, and that's how the back and forth started, or there was a organized debate where you would actually have it on stage. It wasn't just casual conversation. And I think one of the things that is corrosive about debate me bro culture is that we think that it's something that should happen every single place, no matter what the format or genre. We always think that everything should be up for debate, and that's not what it is. Here's the thing, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead. I need you to hip y'all to this. And I'm saying this as a debate nerd. I'm saying this as somebody who has competed in debate and has done it, when I was in middle school and things along those lines. And I was considering it in high school, but I liked comic books and girls too much to be tie myself down with that. I just decided to abandon it. Here's what I'm saying. The thing about debating is debates aren't typically won by the person who is most correct or most honest or most truthful. Debates are won by the person who gives the best performance of somebody who knows what they're talking about. Debates aren't a good way to get to the truth of any matter. It's just like going to court. When you go to court, more times than not, court cases aren't decided by what's true. It's decided by what can be proven and what you can convince people is true. Those are two different things. And if you can give the performance of a good debate, you end up winning the debate. Even though you may have been just making shit up, you may have just been up there freestyling bullshit. As long as you can give the appearance of somebody that is competent and knowledgeable in their field, or in their topic that they're arguing or debating, you can beat somebody that is actually correct and knows what they're talking about. They just don't present it well. And so debate has never been about a truth-seeking thing. It's about a performance. That's all it ever has been. And I even growing up, one of the shows that used to come on was Crossfire on CNN. And all Crossfire was two people arguing with each other about politics. And then ESPN latched onto the format and decided to make that the totality of their sports programming format during the day, which is just two people arguing about things in sports. Okay. That doesn't interest me in terms of discourse. And I don't think it's particularly useful as we move forward. Because here's the thing, and I understand there's an element of cognitive science that plays into this. People that know more about a subject tend to understand where the edges of their knowledge reside, as opposed to somebody who's just familiar with the subject. So an expert knows where the edges of their knowledge is, right? That's kind of what expertise means. You know where the edges and limits of your knowledge. You know what you don't know about a subject. Somebody who just has a passing familiarity, like they Googled something or read an article or something, what they have is a familiarity. They think that their little bit of knowledge is the totality of all the knowledge there is to have about a specific subject. And as a result, they can be way more confident in their incorrectness. Oftentimes when you see people that are actually who aren't trained debaters but who are experts in a field, when they go up against somebody who is a rank novice who's a trained debater, that trained debater is probably going to beat the expert more times than not, because the expert knows where the edges of their knowledge reside and they have their expertise. They don't want to speak in a way that is inaccurate or betrays their actual real life knowledge of the thing. And so debating is not a good way to reach truth. Okay. And so the assumption was that if he wanted to come on my platform and debate, that somehow I'm supposed to make room for that. I'm supposed to just allow that to happen. And then when I said, I ain't doing that shit, instantly it turned into, well, your platform ain't that big. Nobody's watching, blah, 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 blah. And it turned into trying to goad me into bringing him on voice chat so we can argue about things. I ain't doing that either. I think it was, for whatever reason, this person felt like they had to validate their opinion to me. And it wasn't even, I don't even think it was about convincing me. They just wanted to be able to talk me down or shout their opinion out at the audience that was watching it. I ain't doing that, bro. And I've actually had friends that come to me, they'll send me in, they'll inbox me clips of people doing those call-in show debate things. And they'd be like, bro, you will be really, really good at this. Just because I have an obsessive knowledge about current events and politics and all the other stuff. They say, bro, you'd be really good at this. And I just say, yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to do that. because I don't want to get into performative argumentation. I don't, and I think that actually does more harm than good when it comes to actual things that are impacting people's lives. Um, like I said, debate isn't about truth; it's about who can tell the most compelling narrative, and that's all debate's ever been about. It's not about facts. It's not about who has better facts. It's who has better performance. It's theater. Okay. And that's why I don't really like, I'll sit and watch some of the Jubilee stuff occasionally, but I end up tuning out of it because I realize that there's no point in it, because what happens is, specifically if you're talking to somebody who has deeply ingrained beliefs, even if I present you with truth that completely invalidates your deeply ingrained beliefs, your brain has a defense mechanism where it will start drilling down further and further into the depths of confirmation bias, so that even if I prove you wrong, you're going to go 10 toes down and dig even deeper and dig your heels even deeper and entrench yourself further in your incorrectness. There's no there's no winning in that. And it doesn't benefit you, it doesn't benefit me. Debating is not a way to present truth. It's not a way to show the truth of an argument. It's just not. Okay. And when I said no, I'm not going to do it, it instantly turned into where you're going to try to bully me on my own stream, bro. I'm a grown ass man. If you're not going to bully me in real life, you're definitely not going to bully me on the internet, bro. Nah, I'm not doing that. And so that's why I said no. One of these days I may have it. And the things I may open up a voice chat to discuss is stuff like, can Thrag beat the Hulk? Like, I may have a voice chat for that kind of stuff where we're actually debating superhero stuff. Because I used to I admin a Facebook group where we used to do that stuff, and we had a good time doing it. Where we just make up matchups, and it was pre-death battle. So I'm dating myself, but it was pre-death battle, and we used to have that. I would do debates for that. I would do debates about that fun stuff. But things that actually impact people's lives, or people are living and dying behind that doesn't get me, that doesn't excite me at all, because I don't like treating real issues that is impacting people's lives. I don't like treating it like a competitive sport. That's just me. So, and like I said, when I said no, it turned into nobody watches you anyway. So instantly that turns in that it's like, oh, so you're trying to insult me into doing it? Nah, bro. And now I'm really 10 toes down. Like, I'm not even going to bring you on to have this conversation. The bigger issue isn't just one random dude in the chat thinking he deserves access to me interpersonally to have a one-on-one conversation. The big issue is our political discourse has become completely infected with the debate me bro logic, and it's insidious because we're even seeing our politicians do it, where as soon as somebody tries to counter their point, they turn up the volume of their voice to drown out the person that is completely disproven what they're saying with facts. And all they do is entrench that into the minds of their constituents. And so now you're reinforcing untrue things in the brains of the people that are going to vote for you. It's insidious, and I don't think it has much utility. Like I said, I mentioned people treat debate as the highest form of truth seeking. It is not. It's about what you can prove. Okay. And so debate actually rewards speed more than accuracy. If you are able to freestyle bullshit, you're a great debater. And I'm not even talking about debate in the classical sense. I'm talking about the debate in how we use it in our modern parlance, where two people arguing, because really it's just two people arguing on the internet. That's not actual debate. Has rules and structures and rounds and very, very hard and fast rules about what you can do and what you cannot do. The things y'all call debate online does not check those boxes. Okay. But public debate it rewards certainty and doesn't really allow for nuanced arguments and things like that. And unfortunately, a lot of positions politically and social issues have layers of nuance to them. And if we're just looking at the certainty thing, we're stripping a layer out of truly understanding how these things impact people's lives. Okay. I have a whole thing written about why I'm not doing that. And I think I've given too much airtime to the debate me thing already. The only thing I will debate on stream is superhero stuff. I'm not doing politics on here because I don't think it serves any good purpose. Okay. Um, it too many gotcha moments. All they are, like, really, it's just so but somebody can clip social media highlights of them dunking on some poor uninformed person or underinformed person. It's just not worth it. And that's not what I want to turn the platform into. So anyway, I'm skipping a lot because I this was on my mind and I wanted to speak to it, but I realized I've actually done an entire stream about the debate me bro, the corrosive nature of debate me bro culture, and I do not want to relitigate all of that stuff. Okay, but I view it like this. Understand this: for some people, you may have the privilege where politics is just team sports to you. You know, these guys are wearing this color uniform, these guys are wearing this color uniform, you're cheering for the people in this color uniform, and it's all just a competitive sport to you. But some of us, our rights are on the ballot every 4 years, and political policies can actually kill people. And I think it deserves more respect than being reduced down to debate me about a thing. Okay. So I have a lot. I'm going to save this for another stream because I don't want to talk. This is actually bumming me out, and I don't want to talk about stuff that bums me out. Okay. Um, let's actually get into character issues, bro. I've been leaning into character issues, and for those that don't know, character issues. When I first started long boxing while black and started my comic book blog, it started with character issues, and character issues where because I've seen so many people reviewing comic books, but nobody was actually reviewing comic book characters, and so it was kind of me jokey trying to review comic book characters, but I when I first started writing it, it really took on like this snarky ass tone that I didn't recognize within myself and I didn't necessarily not like. I'm a smart ass in real life, but I didn't that's not the totality of who I am. And so I started looking at it like, how can I make this a little bit more beneficial and show a little bit of my creative process in it. And so character issues kind of evolved into, yeah, we point out what's wrong with the character, but we also point out what's right with the character. And if I had the opportunity and the honor of sitting in the creator's chair, how would I revise this character? So that's what character issues really is. Me putting on my creative brain and saying how I revise specific characters that I have an interest in. Okay. And so this week I got a 2-for-1 kind of characters issues. The first one is I want to talk about first I'm gonna before I get into the Spider-Man thing, because there's a whole thing about Torment and Spider-Man, Venom, Amazing Spider-Man and Venom, that spiral. And it kind of ties into character issues, but that's more of a comic book review. I want to talk about Shiloh Norman. For those that don't know, who knows who Shiloh Norman is? If you know who Shiloh Norman is, drop him in the chat. Let me see how much of a deep cut your comic book knowledge really is. Okay. Let me see if I can find my boy and put him on the screen. There he is. Shiloh Norman is Mr. Miracle 3. There have been 2 other Mr. Miracles. I'm gonna do a specific character issue segment where I run down all his stats and things along those lines and give you the full history of him. But what you got to know is he is basically the protege of Scott Free. And Scott Free is Mr. Miracle 2. That's the one that most people know. There's Mr. Miracle 1, who was a golden age, I believe, DC character who was just a master escape artist. Mr. Miracle 2 was actually a new god. And so he had other aspects of he had other powers in addition to being the most prolific escape artist in the world or in the universe. And Shiloh Norman is his protege. Okay. And Shiloh Norman, I feel like, and it goes back to the concept of legacy characters. I think oftentimes why people reject legacy characters is this. You can create a legacy character. Legacy characters are people that take up the mantle of another hero. I think the reason why people end up rejecting legacy characters aligns more like this. The legacy character doesn't feel different enough to justify their existence. And when I saw the design for Shiloh Norman years and years ago, I'm like, that's dope. I like this version of Mr. Miracle. I like Scott Free, but I like Shiloh Norman as, all right, I could rock with this. But as time went on, Shiloh Norman wasn't different enough from Scott Free to continue to hold interest. Okay. It just wasn't. Okay. And so I wanted to take some time and talk about Shiloh Norman. And I'm not going to go into all the stats and the entire history. I'm going to do that in another video. I want to talk about how I think that if I ever got the honor of sitting in the creator's chair and had an opportunity, and they said, let's do a story, let's do a Shiloh Norman story. If I ever had that opportunity, this is how I would approach it. Okay. So that's what this character issues is. We're going to talk about Mr. Miracle 3, Shiloh Norman. All right, cool. And this is not coming from a place of disrespect for the creator, so I don't want to get into that. This is about how I present the character. Okay. So here's what this is. My issue with Shiloh as a character and the way that he is currently being presented in DC, or not presented, because I haven't seen him do anything. Like, I haven't seen Shiloh in anything, if we're being honest. I think that the problem with Shiloh and the way that they present him is he really is too similar to Scott Free. Like, way too similar to Scott Free, where there's not enough difference. And then also, he's not presented as, like, Scott Free has powers. Like, Scott Free has New God physiology, for whatever that means, throughout the history of throughout the history of the character. New God powers have always been kind of vague. Stronger than regular humans, smarter than regular humans, more agile and durable than regular humans, and then pretty much whatever like Orion was kind of on Superman's level in terms of strength, right? And things along those lines. Mr. Miracle was super proficient, like nothing could ever hold him. No cell could ever hold him. So that's kind of what his powers went to. And they never really clearly defined it. And I think maybe that could be a potential issue with when you introduce a legacy character you introduce a legacy character from a character who already kind of has vaguely defined powers. You're kind of inviting a vaguely defined character. And so I think this is kind of how I would improve him. I know that he was kind of presented as the protege of Mr. Miracle, blah 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 blah. This is how I would do it. First of all, I would look at his origin story and his backstory. Okay, I would tie him to the New Gods, because for me, the real legacy of Mr. Miracle isn't just the escapology stuff and the master of escapology. I would actually give him some kind of tie to New Genesis, and maybe present it in a way where Shiloh's parents, they were from New Genesis, but they left New Genesis not just due to the war. Make it part of it where they're kind of conscientious objectors, but also where they didn't like how New Genesis was basically a segregated society. Like it was. If you ever read any of those old Fourth World books, New Genesis was segregated. You had the people that lived up in the clouds, and then the people that lived on the ground, and the people that lived on the ground were called bugs. And there's a whole thing about Orion essentially acting like a Nazi, acting like a whole Nazi towards the bugs on the ground. And I would take Shiloh Norman's parents and make them New Gods who decided that they not only didn't want to be part of the war between New Genesis, they didn't want to be a party to the war between New Genesis and Apocalypse, but they also did not want to participate in this segregated society as it was. And so they created a boom tube and escaped to Earth. And they raised Shiloh to the best of their ability as a normal human being. That's where I would start out. So there's a tie to it. They are actually related by blood to Highfather and Scott Free, but there are some layers and nuances to it. And so he grew up on Earth. That's one thing I would do. I would give him some new god powers, but I would mute them a little bit. And what I mean by that is I would kind of mention that proximity to the source wall is one of the things that jumpstarts a lot of new gods' powers and abilities, and allows them to develop those enhanced powers. And since they aren't in proximity to the source wall, um, he has those abilities late in a latent manner. That's how I present it, at least, where he has the abilities, and there's certain things about, as he grows up, he is able to survive accidents that would normally injure somebody without a scratch. He has an uncanny sense of balance, in terms of athleticism and things along those lines, where you build that part into his story and put that into his kit. But at the same time, it's not on the level of like Orion or some of the other new gods, even the bugs, some of those other bugs, like Forager and stuff like that, where it's not on that level of them. But he grows up here. His parents went into hiding essentially, because not only did they have to worry about the forces of apocalypse tracking them down and using them as leverage against Highfather because they're family, but they also have to worry about Highfather's wrath for them leaving. Because it's been pretty much established in recent, if I'm not mistaken, it's been pretty much established in recent uh, retellings of Highfather, that he's kind of an asshole. And he's kind of a petty asshole. And so I think we can embrace the cocky, petty nature of Highfather and say, yeah, they ran away so that they can be used as a bargaining chip in the war. But at the same time, they also knew how petty he was. And there would be some kind of punishment if they ever resurfaced. Like, he's always known where they are, but he kind of let them go away, if that makes sense. And so I would take it where they raise the character on Earth. He has these kind of abilities that aren't really stated, but you're starting to put it together. And I would do an arc where where is Scott Free? What happened to Scott Free? And have Barda as the tie to a new god, and she has familiarity with the parents. She can't go to anywhere on she doesn't trust anybody on New Genesis, because New Genesis might have a mole or a spy or something, and she's trying to find where Scott Free is and try to get to him before Darkseid gets to him. You see where this is going, right? And so with those two, she finds Shiloh as an adult, um, and just kind of gives him a crash course in the fact, like, sir, you are a new god. And of course, he goes through the whole "I don't believe it" kind of thing, but she kind of lays out, like, all these times where you had this, you survived this car crash without a scratch, where your friends were killed. Um, you've always been effortlessly smarter, effortlessly more agile, effortlessly stronger than a lot of your peers. Why do you think that is? And she's running it down. And so she kind of cuts through it in Big Barter's kind of way, because she's trying to find her husband. She's like, I don't have time for this shit. Listen, kid, I need your help. And the fate of the universe may depend on it, because, you know, if I'm not mistaken, Scott Free had the anti-life equation or something along those lines. It's something, the reason why Darkseid is pursuing him so bad. But she basically says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one of Scott's old mother boxes, and I'm gonna let you finish putting it together so that it can form that bond with you. And I would start out with that, and that's how I would present him as unique, is give him that backstory, but there's still a tie to Jack Kirby's Fourth World, or the new god side of the DC universe. So there's still a literary tie to it, but it's his own. And I think a lot of times when we present legacy characters, like that was kind of the Jason Todd issue for a long time, where they're trying to differentiate between Jason Todd and Dick Grayson. And they eventually made Jason Todd, because initially when they brought in Jason Todd, when they first started with him, he was kind of another Dick Grayson, and if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. I think for a while it was red hair, but realistically, they made them too similar, and people were like, well, why'd you get rid of Dick Grayson? Like, why'd you let him go if you're just going to make another clone of him? And then they ended up giving Jason Todd his own personality, and then his personality rubbed everybody the wrong way, and they ended up killing him. So anyway, I think if you're going to use it, if you're going to establish a character like with him as a legacy, if you're going to establish a character like Shiloh Norman as part of the Mr. Miracle legacy, he has to be different enough, but similar enough where you can feel there's an emotional tie to it, but he has his own thing going on. And so I was looking at, he has to complete this this new mother box that Scott was working on, in his downtime. And he casually calls it the brother box. And the reason why is he sees it as a sibling to Scott Free's mother box. And it has some bells and whistles that Scott Free doesn't necessarily have with his typical mother box powers. And I guess I'm going to have to do an entire episode about the mother box too. Mother boxes, so as you guys understand that from DC, because I know that they mention them in some of the DC movies, but they never really fully discussed what they actually are. And basically, a mother box is a sentient computer that is your personal assistant, but that can also heal you and provide you intel, and do a little bit of energy manipulation, all kinds of other things. I would say that his brother box has its own set. It has the typical abilities, but he built in a couple of other things, like he has the boom tubes, but he also has the ability to have a pocket dimension where he keeps his toolkit, where he has a lot of other little gadgets and stuff that he's built on his own. Right. I would say that's how you establish him. Once he helps track down Scott Free and they get back to the main story, this is where Scott Free starts training him to be his successor and a master escape artist, because now he's on Darkseid's radar. That's how I would tie it together. And like I said, you give him a mother box, call it a brother box, because a sibling to Scott Free's, to the point where the two mother boxes actually refer to each other as siblings. Like I said, it has a pocket dimension where he has a toolkit. Maybe in the toolkit he has lockpicks, like sonic lockpicks or some kind of cosmic lockpicks that require they can unlock just about anything. They're based on the mother box technology. They can unlock just about anything, but it's dependent upon his concentration. Maybe some kind of little thing where he can disrupt magic level technology briefly, like a Green Lantern ring, where Green Lantern rings have been tied to some level of magic too. Like, Alan Scott was tied to magic, but it also is tied to high science, where it almost looks like it. And so he could briefly disrupt very powerful weapons like that. Not enough to completely disable somebody, but enough to escape. All of this stuff is built around getting away and regrouping. That's how I would present him. And I think that there's a story in there, and I feel like he's a super compelling character. His design is really dope. Like, I love how they've designed him. Even in the future state version of him, the future state version of him was dope. I can't find a good enough version to put on there, but you can Google future state Shiloh Norman and kind of see what I'm talking about. But let me jump in my notes and make sure I got everything, because otherwise I'm going to pivot into my next thing. So hold, please. I got to pull up my notes here, guys. Okay. So where the hell is it? Okay. Yeah, lockpick. It doesn't magically open stuff. It requires his attention. The stronger his the stronger his focus, the better the lock picks work. So he has to have a complete mind of serenity when he's picking these locks. And so a lot of times he's picking these locks under very strenuous situations. He's got to be able to control his mind enough to where he can utilize these to escape. Okay. The tech interference, what separates him from Scott, the biggest thing this rebuild really does accomplish is it separates him from Scott Free enough, but he has enough familiarity with the character where you could say this is the successor to Mr. Miracle. You know, he's the earthbound Mr. Miracle. And he becomes the question that he's the one that actually does have some smoke for New Genesis, you know, and questions that he doesn't want to go back and reintegrate into New Genesis as a new god. He likes living on Earth. And he is vocal about how New Genesis is segregated. Okay. And so he doesn't just bow down to High Father and stuff like that. And it kind of puts him at odds with, I guess, would be his cousin or something, who's Orion. And they have a very kind of contentious relationship based on how Orion feels like he should be, you know, since he's a descendant of the royal family, he should be more loyal to New Genesis. And his loyalties reside with Earth. He's not just an escape artist. So, you know, it ties into the freedom aspect of it, but he's obsessed with freedom to the point where it truly does bother him that New Genesis was a segregated society, and he wasn't cool with that. And he truly does. And I don't know what we do with his parents. I don't like the trope of always killing somebody's parents, but I could see where there would be some utility in that. But that informs his character. He believes in freedom of everybody. And so he's a born freedom fighter, and that's what drives his ability to be an escape artist. Okay. That's the lane. And I think that can make him unique enough for Mr. Miracle. I'm going to take a deeper dive on this, y'all. I'm going to actually spend some time and take a much deeper dive into this and give you the full history of Shiloh and give you all the character stats and height and weight and creators and give you books to review and stuff like that. I think Seven Soldiers of Victory is one of them. But I think he's an interesting character. We just need to do a little bit with him. Okay, cool. So I'm going to get to the part that actually confused me because I skipped this entire part in order to get to Shiloh Norman. And this is still character issues. And so I have an issue with this character. I've been reading Spider-Man and Venom Death Spirals. It's basically Amazing Spider-Man, Venom Death Spiral. Okay. And it goes to the problem I have with Spider-Man books recently. One of the main issues I have with Spider-Man books recently is they feel really adrift. They feel really disconnected to themselves, not even to the whole Marvel universe, just to themselves. They don't feel cohesive enough. I mentioned a couple weeks ago the entire character of Hellgate, who just emerged and came out of nowhere and beat the cowboy shit out of Spider-Man and almost killed him. And we're not really given much of a backstory. We're given very vague powers, and all of a sudden he's the most dangerous foe that Spider-Man's ever fought, where he almost beats him to the brink of death and then banishes him to an abandoned planet or whatnot. And then it was dope because Spider-Man ended up getting his own version of the Guardians of the Galaxy, more or less. But the entire character of Hellgate was really problematic because it felt like he was just created just to have a reason to exile Spider-Man. And it felt kind of out of character for Spider-Man to want to stay in outer space knowing that Hellgate was still on Earth, possibly terrorizing the people that he loved. It just didn't feel really aligned with who he was. And I don't know if we really circled back to the entire Hellgate thing. I feel like they might have touched on it. And they beat him with the power of friendship or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if they've ever really gotten back to Hellgate. But I'm saying all that to say this. We're doing it again. So for those that have been following some of the Spider Family books, you know that Carnage, Eddie Brock as Carnage had his own series. And in that series, his primary antagonist was Muse. who was a Daredevil villain, who's a serial killer who does it for the love of the game. It's art to him. And it was a good book. I'm not going to fret. It was a pretty decent book. It had some slow moments or whatnot, but overall, it was a pretty decent series. And it goes back and forth with Muse. I don't know where he got these new powers, but where he has new powers where he's kind of a match for Eddie Brock as Carnage, which was kind of wild. But anyway, long story short, Eddie Brock and Carnage defeat Muse and kind of send him for deals. They don't kill him, but they defeat him. And then the book kind of ends. I don't know if it's completed or whatnot, but then we go into this story, Death Spirals. And there's a new villain in town, and his name is Torment. And I'm gonna put him on the screen for you guys so you can kind of see where I'm going with this, where my thinking was, and why I'm frustrated with this book. So I'm gonna show you this. Okay. Now I mentioned Muse, and maybe I need to pull up a picture of Muse too. So I think I'll do that as well. Okay. That is Torment. Okay. And that's one of the covers. Okay. This is Torment right here, standing over him. To me, Torment looks like Muse with a symbiote on. He looks like Muse with the symbiote suit on. And so I'm gonna pull up Muse so y'all could see kind of who I'm talking about. And so when I first saw this character, when I first saw Torment, I thought that this was Muse. My mind was like, oh, that's Muse. And Muse, since Muse was involved in some symbiote shenanigans last time, Muse has his own symbiote. Cool. All right, I can get with this. It adds a layer of threat to the character who's already a deranged serial killer. Got it. All right. Here's the problem. And I'm before I get too far into it, I gotta show y'all Muse so y'all could see who I'm talking about. And I'm sorry if I'm freezing and stuff like that. That's just the nature of the game. I got an older PC that needs a little bit of TLC. So I'm gonna show y'all Muse real quick, if I can, and then we can compare the two things. But yeah, this is Torment. Torment, like, and if you know who Muse is, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. For me, Torment looks like Muse. He looks enough like Muse, and I'm gonna show. He looks enough like Muse. Even the color palette, like typically there's red around here and stuff like that. This is a cover. It's kind of a low res image, but you see where I'm going with this. Torment looks like he could be Muse. He's not Muse. He's just a random serial killer who's not even a symbiote, but he has enough strength to kill. They killed Shocker for some reason. Like they decided that they were going to sacrifice Shocker for this story. And essentially, Torment stole Shocker's gauntlets. Okay. And then, which this is where it kind of hit me. Like, I thought Muse was a symbiote. Like, I don't know why I had it in my brain. I mean, I thought that Torment was a symbiote. I don't know why I had it in my brain that he wasn't, or that I don't know where that came from, but it only made sense to me because for me, this guy who is able to stalemate Spider-Man, Mary Jane as Venom, and essentially Carnage, because he kind of stalemated Carnage too, with Eddie Brock. He's got to be a symbiote because that's the only thing that makes sense, right? He's got to be a new symbiote. He's not. He wasn't a symbiote until Carnage did what Carnage does, which is betray everybody and bonded with Torment and became a symbiote, which y'all. So anyway, Torment's entire MO is the fact that he sees everything in spirals, and the spirals yell at him and they torment him, and he sees people's familial connections as spirals. And in order to quiet the screaming in his brain, he has to kill family members in a certain order in order to make the torment stop. And so he sees them as giant spirals. To me, the way that y'all could have presented this was Muse has his obsession. He meets another symbiote that has some kind of issue. Maybe they have family issues with Venom and Carnage and they're mad at them. They join, and now we're taking Muse's obsession with art and art forms and the visual depiction of killing, mix it with the symbiote's obsessive need to destroy family. You bring them together. Now you have Torment. Torment sees everything in spirals. It makes sense. I don't know where the hell this dude came from. He just showed up in the Spider-Man book. And so I was about halfway through the series. I'm like, wait, one, that ain't a symbiote. And two, who the hell is this guy? And I feel like he was invented just to kill Paul because everybody hated Paul. Everybody hated Mary Jane Watson's new boo. And so they invented Torment to kill Paul. That's as near as I can figure. Because he doesn't really exist for any other purpose. And for whatever reason, we sacrificed a villain who actually had one of Spider-Man's few C-tier rogues who actually had his own personality. We sacrificed him just so that we could tell a story for Torment. I don't like that. We killed Shocker and kind of jobbed him out completely because, to be honest with you, Shocker was competent in a way that a lot of Spider-Man's lower level rogues weren't. And we killed him just to advance the story. This story is fucked up, bro. Like, I don't know what to think about it. And I think one of my frustrations is I don't think this is going to be something that lasts. I think now that we've ended this little mini series, this is going to get dropped like a hot rock. And we'll see Torment later on at some other point in the future, but they'll kind of bring him back the same way they brought back Muse, where there's no real explanation, even though, he was killed. You know how that goes. I don't understand why Torment wasn't presented as a symbiote. I don't understand why Torment wasn't Muse with a symbiote. I don't understand the role of now we put Carnage on him and now he is a symbiote, where none of this aligns. And it goes back to the adrift feeling of the Spider-Man books in general. Okay. It's just adrift. It doesn't really connect to anything. It feels like rudderless and directionless, like they're looking for something to do. And I think a lot of it has to do with, and I'm not a big fan of, turning the good guy bad and bad guy good and keep flip-flopping and stuff. But it almost feels like it feels rudderless without Norman Osborn as the present threat to Spider-Man. Okay. But I'm frustrated because the book trying to train me to think this was a follow-up to that Carnage series. And it was not. We still don't know what Muse is up to. Muse is just out there in the wind with one hand. Oh, that happened in the book. Yeah, Muse out there with one hand, which to me explained. Anyway, like I said, Muse visually looks like Torment, bro. And so when Torment shows up looking the way he does, and he had a crossover that involved Eddie Brock as Carnage, I just assumed that we're looking at Muse in a symbiote costume. And apparently I was reaching, which is my fault. Like I said, that's on me. I interpreted the story wrong just because in my mind, I went with how I think the story should have gone and what made sense for me. And apparently that's not how that works. But yeah, Death Spirals is just, I feel like it was a disposable story. And I didn't feel like it advanced the story in any way, shape, or form aside from killing Paul. And I think the problem with that is now we kill Paul. It looks like Mary Jane's going to be in some kind of situationship with Flash Thompson, and it still has Peter and Mary Jane separated. it feels so artificial, it feels so fake, it feels so forced and contrived that they were Marvel, one of Marvel's power couples, and now they just ain't no more. And every time there's a book where they actually are together, they end up canceling the damn thing. So it doesn't feel like it meant anything. And it's unfortunate because it was, without all the other elements, it was an engaging story. And it did explore some character stuff, but man, it really went nowhere. It really went nowhere. Um, and it just goes back to now Spider-Man's rudderless again. Okay. So we talked about the entire Shiloh thing. I got my character issues, got it off my chest about what's going on. Let's have a conversation about a little bit about my ADHD journey. Okay. Um, I've mentioned to people in passing that um at some point in my childhood, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I never, like, they never shared that diagnosis with me because I was in the gifted program, and a lot of it had to do with in the 80s and 90s, little black boys and little black girls were not allowed to have ADHD, and if you did, they dropped you in the remedial courses and essentially punished you for it. I've talked about that at length. Um, Finding out that I had been diagnosed as a kid and started putting things together. The fact that I was nonverbal, like I didn't hit any of my verbal milestones when I was little. And then one day I just started talking in complete sentences, so I wasn't delayed. I just didn't hit my verbal milestones, but I wasn't delayed, which sounds weird, but it ties to some other stuff. Um, it was kind of even I spent my entire childhood feeling like something was off, and I could never put my finger on it. And I would see white kids who had the ADHD diagnosis. They would go out and get Ritalin. My mom was a nurse, so they'd come into the office or whatnot and get their midday dose of Ritalin and go about their day. And it was really normal. Like it was normalized for them. It was just part of their daily routine. And I didn't know, hindsight being 2020, I didn't know. I really didn't know that they were actually being given a leg up that I didn't quite have because I was trying to do it. I was trying to do the ADHD thing without any other outside guidance, no knowledge of even my diagnosis or anything. And I just thought I was crazy or stupid. And all these people telling me how gifted I was, and I'm in all these gifted programs, and I felt like the dumbest person in the room, regardless of where I was, because a lot of the stuff, I could not pay attention. I could daydream. Sorry, I could daydream for most of my classes, and still be able to show up for the test and pass and get high marks on the test. Like I didn't have to pay attention in class. Um, but when it came to some of the coursework, like when I actually did have to pay attention, numbers would flip around on me, and I struggled. Like I understood the math, I could do it in my head, but if I had to write it out and show my work, that was it. Like I would fuck it up. And so I spent my entire childhood feeling like, why can't my imagined perception of how normal was, why can't I be normal? You know, why can't, even do it like when I played football, um, just being out there on the field, kind of adrift in my own world. And then having to go out and execute and do the things. I could do it because I had some level of athleticism. I'm clumsy as hell, but I had a little bit of athleticism to me. Um, but not doing the thing just right because I wasn't paying attention. Like my ADHD was inattentive type. And it really messed with me once I got older when I went and did the entire kind of looking back on my life up until I was in my 30s, where I'm like, I struggled so hard in all these aspects of my life. Socially, I was awkward. I was already a year younger than all the people in my class. And, um, when, I'm in middle school, I'm in like in seventh grade, and I kind of have a mentality of a fifth grader in seventh grade. I'm still playing with toys. I'm still doing little kid stuff. I'm not interested in the things that a seventh grader is supposed to be interested in. At least that's what I thought. I didn't know how to interact with my peers in that way. And so it always felt like something is off. And even now, it's hard to explain why there are times where I felt like I was an alien just living in my body, watching other humans interact with one another. But it felt like I was moving through the world sideways compared to everybody else. I could do things really well, but it would wear me down. I would be exhausted. I would burn out, and I would retreat into my own head. And I got to the point where I like, for me, sanctuary was being by myself. And it kind of helped that, my mom had weekend jobs, or what had a weekend job, a part-time job in the weekend, where I could have the whole house to myself and just be to myself and exist in the quiet of my own brain. I think that was kind of a relief. There were times where I would fake sick out of school just because it was kind of a terrifying experience to go there and not only have to deal with being overwhelmed, and I found out later it's kind of overstimulated, but then also having to deal with some aspects of getting bullied because I was awkward. I didn't necessarily know how to engage with my peers and stuff like that. Um, yeah, dissociation. Yeah, that's what it was. Dissociation. Um, and that was my way of kind of coping with it. Like, and it was kind of a blessing. It was kind of a gift and a curse, but not. I think the frustrating part was having like people knew I had ADHD. Everybody, my mom knew I had ADHD, but it never connected to me, and she never told me until I got to be an adult. She's like, "Oh yeah, I thought we told you that," and I'm like, "I went through my entire childhood, thought I was crazy." And like I said, I don't want to feel like I'm providing cover or anything, but there was a very specific reason why. Because in the 80s and 90s, if you were a black kid who had ADHD or any kind of neurodivergence, instantly it didn't matter what your functioning was, didn't matter how smart you were dropped in remedial courses, and that's how you were tracked in our school system. And she knew enough to say, I can't slap him with that, even though she could see kids that, white kids come in to her. She was a nurse. They come and get their ADHD medication midday. They weren't punished for their disability. They were treated for it, whereas I would have been punished for it. And a lot of times, I think I'm pretty sure that that's why she didn't move forward with my diagnosis, because she knew what that meant for my school career. That's what it was. But it was very frustrating to actually go through middle school, high school, college, where I actually had to pay attention. I actually had to study and felt like I had no capability of doing it. I felt like I was just this super immature, unreliable. It was the narrative I ended up telling myself. Super immature, um, unreliable. Like, that was the narrative I built for myself when I actually had to put forth effort, where schoolwork actually required concentration, because I had this ADHD diagnosis that nobody had told me about. And I was carrying all that as a scholarship student in college. I had an academic scholarship for engineering. That's what I was in school for. And every day I felt like I was letting my family down, because I could not sit through those boring ass engineering classes. I could not sit through those intro to construction classes. What are you talking about, brother? Sounds interesting. I'm talking about, so to catch you up, I am talking about basically what it was like having ADHD diagnosis and nobody told me about until I got to be an adult, and some of the maladaptive things I picked up. And so I talked about feeling off all the way through, knowing I was different through elementary school and middle school, and really struggling badly in middle school. I was like suicidal in middle school. Um, you know, and then finding my place kind of in 10th grade. But I kind of found who I was and found my crew in 10th grade. But being on that gifted end, where the reason why my ADHD diagnosis wasn't a big deal until I got to like my upperclassmen years and even college was because I didn't have to pay attention. I could just not, I could just kind of daydream through class and still pass all my tests with pretty high scores, enough to where I got an academic scholarship and went to college. And now I'm in college and I actually have to pay attention and do the studying thing. And I can't do it, and I'm watching my friends be able to go in the library and sit down and lock in and sit down and get all the stuff done that they need to get done. And I'm sitting there like the words are just kind of mixing together. And I'm more interested in conversations and more interested in listening to the music and uh, grabbing books that aren't related to what I'm supposed to be studying. Like I'm supposed to be studying intro to construction, and I'm reading abnormal psychology books in the library just so because my mind would not connect with this stuff that I had no interest in. And so I ended up losing my academic scholarship. I did discover that I was kind of on the path to being in broadcasting. You know, relate to certain aspects we were talking about terms struggling in school. Yeah. And so let's see. My family and I the denial got beat into me so hard. I was 40 before I started to break myself out of it. And see, that's kind of where I was. I was in my 30s, and I had a job where like my first jobby job, like my first real job was working in a group home with troubled kids. And that aligned with the ADHD thing. Once I learned the routine and could get the timing down and stuff like that, I was good. And the reason why worked with ADHD was because I didn't have to focus on any one thing for too long. Because if I did, that meant a kid was getting in trouble or something. So I had to shift focus and shift gears all the time. And it worked fine for me. But when my daughter was born, I wanted to get a job that was more traditional hours. And I got a case management job, and I instantly regretted that because case management is highly detail oriented. It was already an impossible job because the state had taken the job of like two or three other people and consolidated it down to one person doing all of this shit. And I was doing all of this stuff. Um, Whereas with the state, they would normally have 6 months of training for their employees. I got 29 days of training. And so now I'm dropped into the hot water instantly, and I'm instantly underwater. A super detail oriented job that I had no previous history with, and all these shifting responsibilities was a nightmare. And I was self medicating by shotgunning energy drinks. That's how I would do it. I was putting in 16-hour days, shotgunning energy drinks, and every weekend I would sit there and have a damn near panic attack before Monday. And I realized it wasn't sustainable. And one weekend I'm sitting there uh, holding my daughter. I think I said my son first, but I was holding my daughter, and a show came on PBS called "Is It You, Me, or the ADHD?" And I instantly saw myself. Instantly, to the point where I called my mom and kind of told her, "Yeah, I think I should get tested for ADHD." And she's like, "Why? You know, you already have ADHD." Like, what? What? And so that's where it started. And that was kind of where my journey started. And so I went out and and I've told this story before on the stream, but I went out and got an initial assessment, and I went to the university, you know, and met with their psych students at first. And I was dealing with a resident, and the resident walked me through the entire assessment process. And, you know, she's like, "Yeah, it looks like this. It looks like this is the case. You know, you have ADHD or whatnot." And her tenting sight unseen decided that I had anxiety, overruled her. He never even saw me and decided I was drug seeking, I had anxiety, and put me on a bunch of tranquilizers. So I had to switch providers in order to get the treatment I needed. Because when I told my mom what medicine they had me on, she's like, "Those are tranquilizers." And so she went into her network and found a psych nurse who specialized in adults with ADHD and new diagnoses. And so that's where I kind of got my feet on the ground. But I had spent 30 years, you know, 30 years of my life just adrift, um, not knowing what's wrong with me. Um, when I, because I was a good student, but the times where I just could not phone, where I had to phone it in, and got an occasional grade that was lower than what it should have been, and I had to cram to make it work. I still got, in trouble because it was, he can do the work. He's the smartest student in the class. He can do the work. He can do the work, and that ended up becoming my narrative. And so, like I said, I get to college, I actually have to fucking try to study, and I can't make it happen. And I'm sitting there like I'm letting my family down. I'm letting the people that granted me the scholarship down. I'm failing myself. Yeah. You strong, brother. You made it through all. Yeah. I mean, and I think it helps me manage my own kids, and give them grace for stuff. Because this stuff is genetic. It does get passed down, right? Um, Occasionally. And so I can kind of spot things and kind of adjust things and tailor things, um, you know, knowing when one of my kids is getting overstimulated and jumping in and stepping in and saying, okay, what do you need? Do you need a hug? Do you need a second to put on your headphones and kind of dissociate for a while? You know, that kind of stuff. It gave me the knowledge, the knowledge to do that. But I want to go back. Thank you. I appreciate that. I want to go back to this. It's tough when your family doesn't acknowledge it, because I at least had a family that my mom never told me, but she acknowledged that the diagnosis existed and she knew what it would look like. But she thought that since my grades were good, I didn't necessarily need any other interventions. Um, but I still got in trouble. I think, and that's the other side. I still got in trouble for bombing out of college. I got called all kinds of lazy. Um, I wasn't trying. You're making excuses. I bombed a math class, even though I was really good at math. I bombed a math class where I had to show all my work. Um, you're not putting forth the effort when I'm sitting there saying the numbers flip around on me. I didn't find out that was um, something that happens with ADHD brains, where numbers will flip on you. Like if I see a 14, I will say 41 if I'm not thinking about it. And sometimes even if I'm thinking about it, I will say 41. But that's the ADHD thing. Numbers flip around on you. And I'm trying to explain to him, the numbers flip around on me. And I was like, oh, you're saying you're dyslexic now? Like, it was this weird contentious thing where I had established this baseline that I could outsmart my ADHD, and that was the expectation from me from that moment on. But the other side is I was never told that I had ADHD until I got to be an adult. So it's this weird shell game. Like I said, I thought I was going crazy. I really did. I thought I was going nuts. And I think I'm still on my outline. Um the problem with it is, I'm unlearning a lot of really, really negative things that I picked up along the way. Um, One of the things I developed as part of my ADHD was a negative inner voice that screams at me all the time. Where even I could be dead sleep if I have a lot of work to do, because I have a business, and a business and a nonprofit I run. If I'm stacked with work, Um, and my brain sometimes will scream at me in the middle of the night, like, "Get up! Why are you sleeping? You haven't earned the right to rest." Like, my negative inner voice goes all the time. Some people have the radio in their brain with ADHD, and I have that to a degree too. But it's for me, it's a negative inner voice that always goes and always tells me how I'm fucking things up, I'm screwing things up, I'm botching things, I'm ruining stuff, and that's been with me for as long as I can remember. And it really got amplified in college where I have ADHD. Nobody told me about my diagnosis. I'm bombing all the classes I have no interest in. I'm losing this academic scholarship that I worked my ass off to get. Um, and I was the one that was I was the family member that was supposed to go out and get the PhD and have all this other stuff. And I was struggling to get my bachelor's degree. I ended up dropping out of college the first time go around. I dropped out with like a couple of electives to go because I was completely burnt out. And I ended up getting a job to work to support myself because my mom had gotten sick too. And then I ended up going back to college to get my bachelor's degree. But by that time, I had my bachelor's degree. I had a experience level working directly with kids and maintaining programs that as I started moving up through the ranks, I had, masters and doctoral candidates working for me. I was hiring and firing them because my experience allowed me to do that. But yeah, I was the one that was supposed to go out and do all these amazing things. And I really felt like a failure for a long time. Even in my 30s, I felt like a failure. Like I'm supposed to be the scientist and all this other stuff. I was supposed to be the construction engineering, you know, the super smart guy, and I'm working a case management job and never feeling like I was quite living up to my potential. And a lot of that came from because I have a feeling like if I had an idea of my diagnosis and I had been getting treatment for it, I think my outcomes would have been slightly different. Specifically, if I had been medicated through college, um, I could overcome the parts of my brain that get bored with stuff and require that stimulation. But again, being 30 and finding out you have ADHD and then going through your entire life and seeing all the missed opportunities was tough. I understand the feeling of burnout. I'm second year university in politics and feel unmotivated to continue other than just pass my course. That's a real thing. A C is passing, and I had to give myself that grace. Sometimes you got to get through it. And for me, it was I got to the point where I ended up having to drop out to go make money. Um, I was burnt out and I needed to find a way to start taking care of myself and kind of find what I wanted to do in life. Um, One of the crazy things was working in college, I found a strong passion for college radio. And I'm about to age myself here really quick. Our college radio station was one of the first ones that actually was doing internet radio. And if internet radio kind of ties to podcasting. And um we had audience, like we had an audience on bases all around the world. Um and we actually had a job offer on the coast to come do their drive time show. And I went home and told my mom, like, I'm thinking about dropping out of school. I'm going pursuing this opportunity. And they staged a damn near intervention on me. They staged intervention on me. Basically saying, you'll never make any money doing this. You got to get your degree. They can never take that away from you. And like staged intervention on me, basically saying that's not a real job. That's a fantasy and all that other stuff. And talked me out of the only reason I was going to school because I was station manager. I had really found joy working in the radio station, talking to record labels, doing my show, programming and all that other stuff. But they staged intervention on me and talked me out of it. And that was really the only reason that was my only tie to going to school. That was the only thing that was motivating me to keep going was the fact I got a chance to go into the radio station and do my job. And when they told me there was no future in it, and I know that here's the thing, I know that um, a lot of times adults mean well in your life, and you always assume, yeah, my mom wanted me to follow the traditional path of getting my degree, and she didn't necessarily see how I could make a career out of broadcasting. In hindsight, being 2020, I could have made a hell of a career out of broadcasting. Like I said, we're pre-internet radio, we're early stage internet radio. That was podcasting. Adam Carolla did his thing and kicked the door open. That would have been my future. But I was like, I gotta listen. They know what's best for me at the end of the day, and I gotta listen to them. And I ended up completely dropping that entire thing. It was crazy. I gave my show away and all that other stuff, and said, I'm gonna just go get a real job. I don't regret a moment of it because I loved my career working with kids and families. I love my career working directly with kids and saving kids' lives. I have dozens and dozens of kids talk to their parents, and they will credit that they say I play a role in saving their lives. And that's something that is bigger than any accomplishment that I have. But I always do wonder if I would have stuck to my guns and pursued that radio career, where would it have taken me? Because that was a passion. I actually had a passion for that. And when they talked me out of that, that killed my passion to go to school. But I do also wonder, ADHD medications. I did start out, like I said, I started out construction engineering. Once I realized that I didn't know shit about construction, yeah, that's meaningful. Yeah. When I realized I was a construction engineering major, when I found out I didn't have a passion for construction engineering, I went into journalism. And so I did a whole gamut of sociology and journalism courses. I was a couple of electives shy of graduation. So when I tell people I was a journalism major, when I mean I was a journalism major, like had I stuck around for another semester or two, I would have graduated with a degree in journalism. Because my initial goal was I wanted to be, an actual journalist that covered hip hop and music. Like I wanted to be those guys that were actually writing, the serious journalists that were writing in the Source and XXL Mag. Those guys don't really exist no more. But that's what I viewed my world was. Um, One of the signature moments, we almost had an opportunity to interview Method Man and Redman. They were on tour. They came to our city and we had a blizzard and they ended up canceling the concert. That would be my first like actual written actual interview. It is what it is. But um you always have those what ifs, man. There's always those what ifs that pop up in your life. Um, but yeah, I strongly encourage if anybody's listening and you're on the fence as an adult, you're on the fence and you think that this is possibly something, ADHD is something that is a possibility for you. I do encourage you, even as an adult, where you are, go get your diagnosis. So at least you have the working knowledge of what's going on in your brain, so that you don't blame yourself and beat yourself up for the things that just come along with that level, that type of neurodivergence. Okay. Um, and also you get to counter the narrative that you told yourself about yourself. Because that's really what it was, man. Um, Sometimes you tell yourself the worst lies. Um, and since it's in your own voice, you tend to believe them. And being able to disprove the narrative about how I was just a failure from the time I was like 11 till 40, um, that helped out a lot, being able to counter that. I still deal with some of the collateral of that, where having such a low opinion of myself and my abilities, um, it can be pervasive, but at least having a narrative to counter that helped out a lot. And I'm a pretty reasonably accomplished person. I tell people my resume and they're like, that's a pretty astound like by the time I was 36, pretty much reached I'd done everything I wanted to do in my career, to the point where I wanted to pivot off and go start my own business as a new challenge, because I had reached pretty much the top of my career. I was a seat away from an executive seat at a major nonprofit. And the only thing that was stopping me was the fact I had not wanted to go back for my master's. Yeah. Your self-image, how you perceive yourself determines a heck of a whole lot of your outcomes. And for me, I was able to accomplish stuff despite having a really relatively low opinion of myself and my abilities. And I think one of the things that having the undiagnosed ADHD diagnosis is, I got so used to people complimenting me and telling me how smart I was and stuff, that I ignored it because I didn't believe them. You're just gassing me, man. You're just trying to gas me up. That's how I viewed it. And so even to this day, I do struggle with taking compliments and believing them, just because of how negative that voice was inside of my brain. So um if you are on the fence about it, if this is something that you've been considering, go get your diagnosis so at least you know what you're working with. Okay. So I do appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, I did start that community for blurs to sit down and talk like adults, instead of all the gender war BS that goes around for discourse. Um, you know, I got into it, with one group I was in. We were talking about Will and Jada again and having the same reductive conversations that we've been having since 2020 and the original Red Table Talk. And I'm like, is this a black nerd group or is this just a celebrity gossip group? I want to talk about comic books. You see what I'm rocking, right? Like this is me. This is my entire aesthetic and my spirit. I'm the comic book nerd guy. And sitting in nerd groups, black nerd groups specifically, talking about pop culture and relational drama of superstars. That's not what I wanted. That's not what I signed up for. So I started my own community. If you're interested, you can scan the QR code. It's the League of Extraordinary Unks and Aunties. But it is what it is, guys. I do appreciate y'all. I need to go up here and check and make sure that my family had dinner. Thank you. Hey, keep tuning in. Normally I'm on Tuesday nights. But this week my son had something, and so Tuesday was kind of taken over. But I may add a Wednesday evening. I may do some live streaming, play some games or whatnot, and just talk about whatever. My day job is I'm a marketing consultant. I own a marketing agency, and so I was thinking about doing a live stream where I just give people marketing tips or whatnot and just talk about ADHD and life and stuff like that. So Wednesday nights may take the form of me playing games or whatnot, but typically I'm on Tuesdays talking comic books, being a dad, and ADHD and stuff. So but I do appreciate y'all. Thanks for tuning in. If you got anything that you want to discuss or any topics you want me to go over, drop them in the chat. I can talk about pretty much anything nerd related. I may have a breakdown of WrestleMania next week if you guys are interested in that. We can have that conversation too. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for tuning in. Blurting While Dad. Peace.